Draper City Talk is a podcast produced by the municipal government of Draper City, Utah, where we discuss local government services and issues and the community at large. All right, welcome Draper City, back to Draper City Talk. I'm glad to have you with me. I'm Mayor Troy Walker, and today I have a couple of returning guests that you're going to enjoy. We're going to have a great discussion about something that we all know and understand, which is gravel pits, being as we have a large gravel operation in our community. And I've got a couple of guys with me, Cameron Diehl, who I've had on before. He's the executive director of the Utah League of Cities and Towns. And I have Justin Lee, who's the deputy director of the Utah League of Cities and Towns. And so we're going to have a good in-depth discussion about gravel and what it means for us as cities, how the state's getting involved, and maybe what the future could look like. Although you guys don't have crystal balls, but maybe we'll figure something out. I also want to thank Linda Peterson, who is our communications director. Linda, thank you for joining us and running it.
Happy to be here.
Linda's the one that makes this all technically possible, so we're really grateful for her, and it's been good. Well, you guys, welcome to Draper Talk.
Great
Justin,
to be here.
Yep, thank you.
Yep, Justin, why don't you give us your background first, if you would? We've had Cameron before. Give us a little resume for you.
Little resume, all right. So I've been with the League of Cities and Towns for about 3 years now. It'll be 3 years this August. Prior to that, I served in the Lieutenant Governor's office under 3 different Lieutenant Governors, Henderson, Cox, and Bell, in the elections office. So I was the state elections director for a while, deputy director of elections before that. So all of the election stuff for a decade in Utah, I was right in the middle of all of that. So been in the political world for a while.
Yeah, the elections, we got all the questions about the security of the elections. Give us a quick...
How do we do a whole podcast on this one? now you're talking.
I know, I was trying to, maybe we'll tease it for the next one, but, there's a large concern out there among some people that the elections are not secure. I don't believe that's ever been the case in Utah, but anyway. But maybe we will do one on that. Closer to the election, maybe we should. I think that'd be great. Let's do it.
We could do it. Spoiler, that they're very secure, and we can talk about all the reasons later.
So give us a little background, your education experience or schooling. Where'd you go to school? What'd you do? What do you study?
Sure. So undergrad at University of Utah. I did political science. Strangely, though, not really local or national politics. I did comparative politics. I could have told you more about the Iranian Revolution than American politics a few years back. And then grad school up at Utah State University, also in political science. Did study more politics, and things there. I'm a Utah boy. Grew up in Farmington, so just up the road a little ways. Yeah, there you go. That's me.
And folks, I can tell you that Justin, he works really hard. He works his tail off during the legislative session, and he's very effective for us as cities in our league. He operates well with from the highest politicians to the most important lobbyists and all the way in between. So,
well, thanks, Mayor.
Yes, I really appreciate Justin's work. Cam, give us a quick background on you again, so a little about your education, everything for this podcast, in case.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Mayor. Thanks for having us, and thank you for your service, not just to Draper City, but to the League of Cities and Towns, because come September, you'll be the president of the league, which means you'll be leading out in the upcoming legislative session on behalf of approximately 1,500 mayors and council members across the great state. So no pressure there.
No pressure.
No pressure. I've been the director of the league now for 7 years, and then I started the league way back when in 2006, before smartphones, as an intern. I was a student at the University of Utah, also studied political science, went to law school in Colorado, and then came back and worked for the league as an analyst, and then as the lobbyist, and now as director. So I basically spent my adult life in local government.
Cam is amazing, smart, hard worker, and he has maintained his youthful look, I will say. It's going to carry him well through life. Sometimes you'll see Cam and you'll think, what, you're the director of what? But don't be fooled, because very effective folks.
And you should see it when he shaves his beard every once in a while.
No, I've seen that, and I'm like, Cameron,
they were like, who let the intern in?
He looks like he's 25. Yeah,
that's right.
It's like he's still an intern. But yeah, so no, it's good. All right, guys. Well, we're glad to have you again, and appreciate your service in the league, because you talk about herding cats as a mayor. That's like herding all the cats. I'm trying to get them all online. Well, let's talk about these gravel pits. As people know, Draper, we have a gravel pit operated and owned by. We have a couple of them actually. We have more than one. One of the biggest ones operated operated by the Clyde companies. It's been here a long time. They extract sand, gravel, and they make concrete. Then we have Staker, and we have JB Parsons, where there's a couple along the point of the mountain as you head south. First one's Clyde as you're going south. Next one, I think Parsons. Next one's Staker. So there's a couple operators. One of them up there also recycles asphalt, so you have some different operations going on. But the only one that's in Draper City is the Clyde Company's Geneva Rock operation. So they are, of course, as you know, if you've ever needed sand and gravel, that's what they do. They make bedrock into gravel, and they get sand and they make concrete, and that's one of the key building elements. In the huge growth that's been going on in Utah, every project needs concrete. Every road that UDOT builds needs some concrete in it. So the legislature has called this material, at least the name for it now is, and I don't know if I disagree with them. I think I do agree with them. Critical infrastructure material. So
that's right.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about maybe to set it up from a mayor's perspective. Gravel operators are operating. They're dirty. They have dust. They make noise, I guess, if you're close to them. They maybe vibration, depending on what type of mining operation they're doing. Citizens don't like them. There's citizens that believe that the dust off any of these gravel pits may cause cancer or other major health problems. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying it does. But there's a gamut of what people think they do. They think they are harmful to the environment, both individually to persons, harmful to the environment generally, and they make ugly scars, and they leave a pit behind, and there's all these reasons. So citizens are always like, we don't like the gravel pit. The development industry, from be it road builders or home builders or office building builders, they buy their stuff, they use it, they need it. It's critical for them to operate. So those are sometimes a contrasting point of view. And currently, local municipalities, if the gravel operator's inside the city limits, inside the city's boundaries, the municipality has an owning authority over the operations. So sometimes, in our case, some of Geneva's operations have been going on before, long time ago, and then they've acquired more property as they've gone along. And their goal and their argument is, as we purchase this property, we get to incorporate all of it into our operation, and we don't really care what your zoning is, because when we're an operator, we get it as we acquire this property, it becomes part of our operation. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's their perspective. Okay. And so, of course, that gets citizens. They say, hey, city, do something about this. And so we've been in a long, kind of protracted argument or disagreement with Geneva Rock over their operations. They would like to extract gravel out of more or all of their property. We are saying, well, the property that you had that's zoned for this, go ahead. But this new stuff, when you bought it, it was zoned agricultural. So no, we're not going to change the zoning, because agricultural zoning doesn't allow you to extract sand and gravel. We're not going to let you, extract more sand and gravel out of this other property. And their argument is, hey, first of all, it's all part of our operation, and so in our situation, we've gotten ourselves into a lawsuit with Geneva Rock. The city of Draper filed a lawsuit against Geneva Rock, so we can't talk a lot about the details of that, but that is a public document. We're in a protracted lawsuit with them, and we're fighting for what we think are our zoning rights as a city, and they're fighting for what they think are their rights as an operator. Have I set that up right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's
as an
very well
operator
said.
and as a property owner.
And a property owner. And again, I don't think it's, I think Geneva, in their minds, they bought the property to get sand and gravel out of it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. And their mind, from their perspective, there's no other reason to have bought that property but to get sand and gravel out of it. Now,
they tell us now, and I don't have any reason to doubt them, that when they're done, their goal is to build a community, houses, office building, a lake. I don't know if you've seen the renderings, but
I've not seen the lake.
No, their end result of their quarry operations is not just to leave a quarry, but they want to grade the hillside such that they can build homes, office buildings, retail, and a big lake. So, and they have water rights. So this is something they could actually ultimately do. And as I've sat and talked with their leaders, that's what their ultimate goal is when they're done. So I think, from Geneva's perspective, what they tell me is, hey, when we're done, we're going to take all this material, but we're going to have a community. We're going to have more retail, more office. That we're not going to leave behind just an open pit. So that's sort of It's part of the arguments we're dealing with. But okay, you guys, jump in. So where are we? So Draper City, like other cities, we'd like to keep our zoning authority and be able to do it. And then, so what are they doing? What's their perspective on the what are they up to?
Well, I think maybe let's run back on some history, and Cameron, you can give some of the history since you were there. But this has been an ongoing conversation for several years about this back and forth between the city wants to keep their ability to zone, to say what happens in certain areas of the city, and the gravel pits want to find the gravel that they need. And so let's talk about where we're at, and then we can talk about where we are now.
Perfect. If you go back in time a few years, and you'll remember this, Mayor Walker, Representative at the time, Logan Wild, ran House Bill 288. And the effort around House Bill 288 initially was to try to settle some of these questions about expansion and property rights and fugitive dust and all of these policy questions related to gravel, and was trying to answer some of those questions around local authority, state authority, property rights, and the like. Ultimately, his initial version of House Bill 288, we thought, went too far and eroded, pun intended, some of our local authority. Ultimately, we got to, for lack of a better term, a ceasefire with the final version of House Bill 288. It was not a finished product, but it was finished enough for that legislative session. So the expectation was House Bill 288 was going to pass, and it essentially locked in ordinances at the time, and it limited temporarily some of the local government regulatory authority, but it was really not a satisfactory long-term answer for either operators or local governments, and by extension, the public. We spent a significant amount of time that following off-season, and your city was heavily involved in those conversations, trying to come up with Part 2 of House Bill 288. Ultimately, we were not able to get to yes by the following legislative session, and so all the stakeholders agreed, we're not going to push anything either side. We're not going to push anything this session. We recognize the status quo is still unsustainable, but let's work on it in the following interim. Well, during that period of time, Representative Logan Wild left the legislature, so we lost the bill sponsor who was trying to be the Solomon of
Yes.
of the issue. We also had a little thing called COVID and the global pandemic, and ultimately, and then we had a gubernatorial election. So Logan Wild actually went to work for then Governor Herbert, and then there was nobody in the legislature who raised their hand and said, hey, I want to take on this issue of gravel pits. And then with COVID and the election and everything else, it fell onto the back burner. Well, what we've seen in the subsequent years, it's not just a Draper issue, but you're seeing more gravel pit battles occurring between local governments and gravel pit operators, ranging from Brigham City to Parley's Canyon and places off the Wasatch Front. So what you saw this past legislative session were a couple of bills that really were trying to get back to what are those next steps from House Bill 288. And Justin was involved in those conversations, and you personally spent a ton of time on behalf of both Draper and the league in general doing a deep dive into these bills to understand what the problems were they were trying to solve, and whether there was a path forward either in the session or now in the interim.
And I think, even before this last legislative session, the previous year, there was discussions around gravel pits. Senator Scott Sandell ran his bill, SB 75, in an effort to try to help cities with gravel pits by doing some redistribution of the sales tax.
Yes.
So cities with gravel pits were getting some funding from cities who don't have gravel pits, and that was a difficult discussion. Lots of different feelings on that one.
It was difficult because you have myself, member of the league at the time, and all of my, and so it was a tough spot because other cities are giving up some of what they were getting to those cities like us, Draper included, that gets more revenue because of the
gravel. And try to mitigate some of the effects. But the interesting thing is, you talk about Logan Wild, being gone and no one really raising their hand. Everyone that has raised their hand so far hasn't wanted to touch it for much more than a session. And we had Representative Kevin Stratton tried to run a bill, and it went away very quickly in 2023. Scott Sander ran the one bill and then said, okay, now I'm out of this business. Last year, and we get to the bills now, so Senator David Hinkins had SB 172, which did what you had mentioned earlier on, which pulled back some of the city's authority to either approve or disapprove or change the zoning for expansion of gravel.
And the theory behind that, so everyone's clear, is the concept that the legislature has is, hey, look, we know all these cities hate these gravel operations. They don't like them. They'd rather not have them. But we need sand and gravel to build. And so it's probably, in their mind, in the legislature's mind, it makes more sense to not have cities regulate it because everybody needs it. It's more expensive if everybody's like, put the pits off the Wasatch Front. Well, then you have trucking costs that raise, no one can complain to the legislature quite like a developer about their increasing costs as we go into the housing crisis, which we've talked about. But all this contributes to this housing crisis. The cost of material, cost of labor, cost of fuel to deliver the material. So you can kind of see where the legislature's coming from that perspective.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's very important to acknowledge the fact that, and I think this is true, all of us acknowledge, nobody's saying we don't need gravel. For growth, for roads, we have to have it. It is a critical infrastructure material. We can't grow without it. We can't build without it. We can't fix our roads without it. We can't fix the road that the gravel trucks are driving over without it. It's kind of a cycle there. But
I also think
we have to have it.
And I think a lot of cities don't necessarily hate gravel pits, but it's a matter of trying to find the right balance.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the neighbors and the residents have to deal with the consequences of the gravel pit nearby. So what is the right balance? And the city is better positioned to find that balance than the state is. And we make that argument about everything, not just gravel pits, but everything in the planning space.
Well, and the thing with the gravel pits is a lot of the gravel pits are in places that weren't that populated when the gravel pits started. But we've grown so much over the X number of decades that now the gravel pit is the backyard. It's not something that's down the road.
Our gravel pit was out here in the middle of nowhere with the prison, which was at the time in the middle of nowhere. And of course, now Draper's grown and everybody else has grown this whole area. But and the neighbors will say, hey, maybe they say I moved to an extra gravel pit. You can't expect not to have gravel operations. But I guess what they'll say is, well, we didn't think it'd get bigger. We moved expecting it. We looked at the zone and we saw it was agricultural, so we didn't think it'd get bigger. So that's their argument.
We knew there was a gravel pit, but we thought that was going to be the gravel pit, not the 120 times bigger.
Or we thought the hours of operation were going to be this, and not at 5 a.m. till 5 a.m. And again, that to me, that comes back to the balance. And how do you find the right balance? Because we all acknowledge the need, but then there are these other consequences. How do you mitigate those consequences?
So SB 172, it's trying to pull back cities' ability to regulate them. Go ahead.
That's right. Yeah, trying to pull back cities' ability to regulate them, take away some of our ability to zone, allow them to expand onto property that they own. And so this one gets really interesting from the political perspective. For everyone, just a little peek behind the curtains in what we do. We have a weekly meeting with all the cities and towns or their representatives. We call it the Legislative Policy Committee, LPC. We get up every Monday and we explain, here's the bills, here's what they are. We have discussions, we take positions. So 172, we got up and explained it. We had the gravel guys come in and talk to us about it, which is fun for them. Kudos, by the way, to the gravel guys if you're listening. That's brave to come up in front of the committee and have rocks thrown at you, pun intended. But we had a motion to oppose this thing. And before the bill even went to a committee, as soon as this bill dropped, everybody reached out to their senators and said, we hate this bill's a problem, this bill goes too far, this is taking authority away unnecessarily, and the bill never went anywhere. So that bill it got stopped before it even got out of caucus.
And that's what we call the League Army.
That's the League Army at its best.
The League Army is all of us elected officials who have our representatives in our text message, all on all their contact information, and we're more than willing to send that text message or make that call. And so when we as league leadership and we decide the issue is League Army worthy, then the League Army goes to work.
The League Army goes.
It's an effective. I've had legislators say, please stop. Please tell them to stop calling and texting me. I can't take any more of it.
Yep, and that's exactly what happened on this one. Yeah. Those are the great days. And so, and again, this one was fun because we used the League Army before it even got to committee. So 172, never even got to a committee, never had a hearing. And going back to this theme we talked about of senators or representatives running the bill and then backing away, Senator Hinkins said, I want nothing to do with this. He dropped it, and then Senator Bramble said, okay, I'll take it over. So they changed sponsors. That's how big of a response we gave them on this one.
And folks, the way a bill comes to life is it usually forms in the brain of somebody who wants something from the government, a company. They take it from their brain to their lobbyist, who then says, for a fee, sometimes substantial, I can get your idea into a law. And that's how most of them come about. I mean, it used to be that commercial, how a bill becomes a law. They left the lobbying part out first because that's really where it comes from. Some company or some person has an idea that the government should do something differently, and then that's how it goes. So, 172 is coming out of the brains of the gravel operators.
Yeah, and let's maybe stay on 172 because there's another bill that shows up in the middle of this. But 172 in the session, really, it just sat there for weeks. Didn't go anywhere. There was discussion that we were going to have a big get-together. And then in the second to last week of the session, about 8 days left in the session, we had a big gathering, a bunch of folks from the industry side, city folks. Mayor Walker, you and I were both in the room, and hashed through the bill line by line and looked at what are we really trying to get to. Because one of the other things people don't always understand is someone has the idea, but then someone has to draft the bill.
Right.
And so sometimes it is a lawyer from the corporation or someone who helps draft it, but then ultimately it goes to the drafters who work for the legislature. And so some of it's going through and saying, what are we really trying to get to? Does this bill actually accomplish that? And so we hashed through that line by line and actually found quite a bit where we realized there's stuff in here we don't care that much about. There was stuff in there they didn't care that much about, and got closer to what may be a consensus on this one. So on 172, on this one with that expansion, and some of it has to do with mining rights, some of it has to do with this critical infrastructure material, or gravel for short. That's going to continue on. We're going to circle back up. We're going to look at the bill and see if we are at a closer place of consensus. The one allows us to still retain our authority, but two finds ways for them if there's things that can make their life easier and that they can expand or whatever they need to do without taking away our authority.
Right.
Then we're in a place where we can talk about that.
And we got close. We got real close. Those sessions where folks were in the room, all of us, and we're going literally line by line and talking to each other, and we made a lot of progress and got pretty close. Like the second day of the last session, I think. Yeah. We're still getting texts and phone calls wherever you were. Hey, where are we at? And then we decided we can't keep negotiating on the phone the last day, so we
pulled it out. Yeah. So in the middle of all of so that's 172, and a parallel track a few days after 172 comes out, HB 502 comes out, and this is from Representative Casey Snyder up in Cache County, and his bill was similar but different, and no one probably cares too much about the distinctions, but it was a slightly worse version of taking our authority away. It was even more egregious from our perspective. And so we similarly said, this is problematic. There's no way we're giving up this authority. It just went too far. And we ended up with a bill that did ultimately pass, which was the new version of HB 502, which is doing a study. And so we have this parallel bill now that is doing a study that's looking at basic gravel pit operations, again, critical infrastructure materials. And one, we don't really even have a good idea of how many operations are out there in the state. So one, how many operations are out there in the state? Two, how much do we really need? And do we have the operational capacity to fill that need? That's a really important question.
Yeah, and in one of those presentations, you talk about like the needs. So one of the gravel operators, lobbyist, made this statement. I remember it because it struck me. He said, in California, and at certain places in California, they don't let them extract gravel or sand, so they were barging sand and gravel from Canada. And I think the point he was trying to make was, this is terrible, we can't have that. And then my comment to him was, so if you get everything you want, are you going to train our gravel to California? And if you remember, he was stymied by it. He didn't.
I do remember that.
He was in a stymied moment of, and I'm thinking, of course you will if you can make money at it. So when you think about needs, it's not just maybe even our, we think about just our local needs, but don't put it past them to, it's America, they got to make money. But if it really is California, you can't get sand and gravel. So one of our arguments is, hey, do we want to change all the laws to help California? I don't think so. So that's something we got to keep looking at. But.
Yeah, so that's in a nutshell what the study is looking at is what's the need, what's our capacity to fill that need, and then if we have to truck it in 30 miles versus 50 miles, what is the actual cost differential between that? And I don't know what the math is on that. I'm sure I can acknowledge that if we're barging it from Canada, that's going to cost more than driving across the road. But I don't know if taking it from Tooele versus Davis, I don't know what the difference is there if I'm building something in Harriman. I have no idea.
I was in California this year, and I saw some gravel operations. So they're still doing it in some part of California. But anyway.
The big thing that we asked for in this study is, what are the impacts of all of these, operations on our infrastructure in particular. We talked about roads a little bit, but these big heavy gravel trucks rolling across roads beat them up pretty well. So we want to look at what are the impacts on our infrastructure and if there are ways to mitigate that. So again, we acknowledge we need these, but if we've got one in our community and it's beating up the roads, if it's making the noise, if it's putting the dust out there, are there things we can do to help mitigate that? So you live next to a gravel pit, but I don't know what the answer is, but somehow we don't do it during certain hours, or there's better dust control, or somehow there is a fund to help us pay for roads or something like that. So that's what the study's going to look at throughout this year. It's the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. And if you're wondering why the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, because one of the other questions is, who should regulate this? All of mining in the state is regulated by the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, or DOGM. Gravel pits are not the same thing. We don't classify them the same way as mining. You may be mining part of your property and doing gravel on the other part of your property, and they're regulated differently. And so there's a question about, is there better ways to regulate that? Is there a way to streamline that? And we're open to talking about all of that, again, so long as, they can't just expand unfettered and we still keep our authority.
And this goes to the theme that's been going on for a number of years in the legislature. As we've had housing crisis, and this is something we all deal with in our league situation, but this mentality is the same. Why are we having a housing crisis? Well, there's a whole lot of reasons, and Cam, we explained them before. There's interest rates, there's cost of materials, there's labor shortage, all this business. But what is the underlying theme from legislative minds is, well, it must be the cities, because the cities don't want to have apartments, or the cities don't want to have a gravel pit so that we can get roads. So the lens is the cities are the ones obstructing the growth, and the cities are the reason the rents are so high, the reason housing costs so much, and housing costs are going to go up because we got to truck sand and gravel. So the legislature is going to be looking and saying, well, should we regulate gravel pits? Maybe we better, because it's the city's fault. I mean, and in our case, we've worked with Geneva over the years, and we got close one time back in 2020, really a little bit before 2020. To a deal where we were trying to kind of agree on a boundary and then give them some zoning rights. We never could get a unanimous council on it. And so they kind of pulled their application and we stopped talking. I mean, a couple of times we had public hearings that filled City Hall with people. In fact, it's one of the largest crowds we ever get. But now we're back in this stage of we're suing our gravel operator. The legislature's looking at it from this critical infrastructure, cities are obstructing point of view, and so we're in a lawsuit moving forward, and then we have these bills. And 502, there's one part of 502 I want to just make sure go over. There was at least, and I don't know if it came out of, maybe it was 172, I get them confused in my head. There was the one, I think it was 502, that said cities got to go find sand and gravel.
That's right, yeah, they have to do an inventory.
So folks, the bill said we as a city, Draper City, had to go out and look around the ground, the dirt, and determine where sand and gravel deposits were. That would have been every city. So then we're in the business of finding their materials for them. I mean, that's the level of involvement.
That's right, yeah,
the original bill. Prospector.
Yeah, prospector with no claim rights. And then an obligation to inventory our city and report it to them. And if we didn't inventory it and report it to them, a fine, if I remember.
Yeah, it was such a fascinating part. So and that's part of where the study came from. But it shows you how far some legislators are willing to go to take cities out of the picture. Yeah, and hopefully that's some of what we learn. Because again, acknowledging a very real thing is I mean, this is the tricky part about mining. If we knew where everything is, that would probably be a lot easier. But we don't know where everything is.
And Draper City does not have a geologist on staff that looks for mining gravel, mineral operations.
Wild.
Maybe it's a new position.
I don't know if anybody's city has an on-staff gravel finder.
Yeah. Can you imagine that?
But that's part of what the study is supposed to be doing, is trying to figure out at least what do we know about where stuff is, where it is. SB 75, going back to that bill we talked about that kind of redistributed some of the sales tax, it took our staff a ton of time to actually even identify which cities have a gravel pit in the boundaries. And we had to reverse engineer that from different stuff. So no one quite knows exactly where they all are, which ones are doing what. So probably a good thing to inventory, but yeah, the idea of us going and finding the gravel in the boundaries is pretty wild.
And ultimately came out of the bill because of our lobbying efforts.
That's right.
To say, what is the problem we're really trying to solve here?
Right.
And if the problem we're trying to solve here is a better understanding of the aggregate availability and what the need is, well, there are better ways to do that than creating the spirit of 49 for cities across the state.
Our new city symbol's a pickaxe and a shovel.
There is some city who has a pickaxe as their symbol.
Well, high school, Bingham.
Yeah, Bingham.
Bingham has that. That's right.
Miners, yeah.
But so yeah, as far as next steps, it's really reconstituting a lot of the groups we had this last legislative session to talk about all those bills, all the pieces of the bills. I was told yesterday that Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, Dogum, is selecting either they've selected in the last day or two, or are selecting the next couple of days who they're going to contract with to do this study. So very soon we'll be called in and have different people from different cities, have some of our staff giving input on that study. So that'll start moving forward fairly soon.
Well, and Mayor, you know this, but I think it's important for your listeners to realize that the 45-day pressure cooker of the session is not the place for in-depth study and analysis and reasoned, thoughtful, deliberative approaches.
Lawmaking, yeah.
Well, it's a place for lawmaking.
Yes.
But it's all of that prep work. It's really best when most of that prep work is done during the off season to then inform the policy making, right? You want ideas that are not half baked. You want ideas that are ready for that final deliberation. And one of the things we learned from this past legislative session was, and one of the things we pointed out to legislators and they agreed, was that this issue was bigger than a 2-week conversation. And even just the fact that here we are in June and the study is just now getting underway, I think demonstrates that. But it definitely is going to be front and center for the 2025 session. There's a lot of work to do between here and there.
But, when you talk about the legislature and sometimes how it operates, I mean, by and large, I think they do a pretty good job, doing the people's business. But you have every session some laws that are one mad legislator or somebody mad about something. I mean, and folks don't think that one mad legislator can't make something a law, because they absolutely can. Or one legislator has an idea and they give some anecdotal evidence. I think of the ADUs, how that just sort of came out of one legislator having a constituent say, "Hey, I can't rate my basement," and we went from there to, and it took the league. We had to show, hey, we have a lot of units, but anyway, it's just interesting how, don't think that your vote for your House member, your Senate member is not important, because in some ways it's probably more important than ever, because as the legislature really runs the state of Utah, in the sense of they really are a force. I mean, the governor's there and he has a veto power, but he can get overridden, and now this legislature created the ability to call itself into special session. And in a lot of ways, that cut the executive branch's power down, in my mind, because now they can call themselves in. You have to, and the governor has to balance that too, because he's in a position where, he's got to be, if he's going to veto something, he needs to know he can win. And otherwise it's just news coverage for it. But so, I think it's election season right now, and if what's on your mind, look at people who are interested in your local community's rights. Is your legislator going to go up to the Hill and remember they live in a city, remember they live in a neighborhood, remember they don't think, they got their lot, and they don't, and they can't just forget that the next piece of land that gets developed, they gotta remember where they came from. At least that's, I hope, what we do is we send people to the House and the Senate, our stateside, that care about local issues, because in a lot of ways we're under attack. I feel it, because it's like you said, this 2025 session, this gravel operation stuff is going to be front and center, and it's going to get resolved one way or the other, I believe.
Yes, and I agree with all of that. The silver lining I'll put on it is because of your role as the president of the League of Cities and Towns, and because of the credibility that Justin has and we have as an organization at the Capitol, we're in the rooms for these discussions. So again, for the listeners who care about this, make sure they're following up with your legislators and following up with you, and making sure that people who represent them at the Capitol understand the perspectives of residents. And we're going to be in the room bringing those perspectives, not just from you and Draper, but from your colleagues across the state who all have similar but a little different experiences. Again, trying to find this right balance of who governs, who has the authority over what piece, how are you mitigating the consequences, while also recognizing the drastic need we have for this critical infrastructure and securing it in a way that makes the most sense.
And this one is fascinating because we do have, we talk about this a lot, where a lot of the issues we work with, the public should care about, but they get very wonky, and it's hard to get people fired up about some of the stuff because it's hard to distill into talking points. It's super technical. People get this one. People see the effects of gravel pits. People have opinions about gravel pits. And so, we never quite got there, but, we had talked several times about if there was an issue we could get the public fired up about, this would be one of them.
Absolutely. And, you also have to keep in mind, too, we are the cities, we are political subdivisions. That means subdivided. That means this. We got divided off of something bigger than us, and that's the state. So, to some degree, we're fighting for our lives in the sense that, there was a good reason to subdivide. There was a good reason to create cities. People want to control where they live, and they want to have a say in it, and I get all that. And so, but the context of cities being obstructionists and NIMBYs, not my backyarders, that stuff is real. I think you've seen a fundamental shift across the course of time where, like, developers want to build something in your community. They used to come work with the city council, and they used to come work with the mayor. They used to come try to make some deals. And as they've run into heavy NIMBYism, some of them just said, we're just going to skip that part and go right to the legislature. We're going to spend our money lobbying legislators. We're going to point out all the problems the cities cause us, and we're going to win that war. And it's easier to win because when you have kids living in your basement, and you have people can't afford a house, and there's nothing to buy, that stuff starts to resonate. So it's a tough world that we're in. I personally think compromise and making deals is the way we get by. Working together. Everybody gets something. Everyone gets everything. Politically, we're sort of polarized right now, and at least on the national level, where it's I got my camp, I got their camp, and the winning argument for people running for office is, I will not work with the other guys. I will go to Washington and fight the other guys. I will kill the other guys. I will fight them. And there's nobody out there saying, I'm going to go to Washington and solve this problem. And so we don't have that locally. Luckily, in our state government, we're still, when you guys agree, are still working together. But that mentality, as you listen to these campaigns, it's like, oh, so you're going to go there and do nothing? You're just going to go there and yell at each other? Anyway.
And that is important because and this is one of the reasons I think we can get to a good compromise on this one, because we are talking. We're talking to the representatives from the industry. We're talking to legislators. Nobody's walking away from this and just saying, my way or the other way. It's let's talk about this. Let's figure something out. That's why we're doing the study. It's why we push these things off to the interim. I liked what Cameron said. It gets fast and furious during the session sometimes, and when you're trying to gather data, you don't have enough time. But now we've got the time to have the reasonable discussion, and we're going to do it.
So the SB 172 is kind of sitting.
Yep. So 172, we've got we had a long meeting. We had some compromise. So we have some draft, quote unquote compromise language that exists, and we'll use that as a jumping off point. That
bill might come alive again next session.
Yeah.
HB 502 is in the study session, and those are our two bills that we're working on gravel.
And so whether they kind of cross over at some point again and we get one big bill, or if we end up with two bills again, we'll see. But certainly we expect to see something this year.
Well, that's great. Any other things you guys want to add to what we got coming up, what's going on?
The only thing I'll add, piggybacks on what you and I talked about the last time you had me, is Justin just spent a half an hour talking about two bills. And
Oh,
all
yeah.
told, last year there were 270 bills that impacted cities and towns in some way.
And how many got passed last year?
591.
Okay, folks, in 45 days, your legislature got the sausage grinder going and did
591 bills.
Most in history, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Previous record was last year with 575.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
They're cranking them out.
cranking them out. And I don't know if that's a badge of honor or not. I kind of want to vote for someone who's going to go repeal 100 bills, laws. But their mentality is like, to be effective, to feel like they're doing their job, they got to pass bills. And so 278 of that 591.
Yeah, 270 of them were bills that impacted local government in some ways. Now, these two were big league priorities, so we spent a lot of time on them. But we as league staff, and you as league first vice president this year, and your team at City Hall, we were trying to stay on top of all of those moving pieces. These two were two of the bigger ones, but there's never a dull moment, and this is why even during the off season, I say that in air quotes, we're at the Capitol on a regular basis. I was at the Capitol this morning with Senator Cullimore on another issue, and there's really not a true off season anymore because of the rush of bills. Because even though there was 591 bills, a lot of the work for those bills happened during the spring, summer, and fall.
Yeah, when that session's on, it's really all hands on deck kind of thing. And my hat's off to the legislators that do it, because they take 45 days out of their lives. They go up there, they work hard to do it. Now, I don't always agree with all the stuff they do, but they do work hard. They do.
Yep.
I think by
Absolutely.
and large, most of them, 90, good high percentage of them are trying to do good things for Utah. I don't think they're any nefarious. But every now and then you get one of these bills where one of them's mad, one of them's this. And those are the ones sometimes I'm like, hey, we had to stamp those out. But it's always an interesting time of year.
Yep.
Yes, it is.
And how many days until the next one? Cameron, usually
So
next session. Yeah.
Yeah, so we actually, let me do the better countdown first. I've been tracking the number of days until Utah football starts
Yes.
back up. So that's a much happier note. And as of this moment, I believe we're at 83 days until football season. I don't have the actual countdown until January once we get started, but we'll start tracking that here pretty darn soon.
And how big is the staff of the league? What's your total employees?
We have 11 full-time employees and then several people on contract.
Yep. And then, when we're up at the Hill, we've added some bandwidth the last couple of years. So we had 7 people who were up on the Hill fairly regularly. So 7 people running around tracking those, 270 bills.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So.
It's fun. I watched you last year a couple times. We'd have that long meeting where we're redlining these bills, and we're out there kind of arguing with each other. And then I'd see you go out and you move into the next group of lobbyists, and you're like feeding. It's like nice, Justin. Here, Justin. Trying to, they were in there arguing. It's interesting to watch. So
we have to flip modes pretty
Yeah,
quickly there.
I'm watching Fight in the Room, Justin. He's out there, and then he's glad handing Justin, trying to make sure everybody likes the league. So
Exactly.
And then you get in the basement, and it's Justin swears in front of the staff. It's a whole different thing.
Well, and I do want to say, we have a small league staff, but you guys do a great job tracking that many bills, and I think the league members felt informed. I think they felt like you guys really served us well, did a good job for us. So,
Well, thank you.
we're lucky to have a league of cities and towns we're actually lucky all the cities can work together. You guys work, and we work together with the legislature, because that's not common. I mean, as Cameron, as you've traveled with other leagues, so you've had this common question: how do you guys do it in Utah? How do you actually get along? But we still do here, which we need to keep doing. I mean, we don't need to get in those silos where I'm going to fight that, and that, because I don't know where that's going to end up. I don't think that's good for us.
Yep. Amen.
Absolutely.
So, all right, gentlemen, I appreciate you coming out again and keeping us informed, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor.
Linda, thank you.
For timely information on city news, events, traffic alerts, and public safety emergencies, you may subscribe to email or text notifications from Draper City by visiting draperutah.gov/notify, or follow us on social media at Draper City, Utah on Facebook and at Draper City on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. This has been Draper City Talk. Please join us again.